hey guys, it's time for something a little bit random here on my channel. You know, mostly I talk about books, but I wanted to talk about something else that is a great passion of my life that not too many people know about. I love old-time radio. When I was a little kid, my parents had us listen to old-time radio, and I started loving it then. I would listen to it sometimes as I went to bed at night, and I still adore it to this day. And I feel like the next generation is going to have no idea what old-time radio is. I feel like my generation has no idea what old-time radio is or what shows are good and worth checking out. So if you're at all interested, here are my top 10 recommendations for shows that I like that are old-time radio. Check out your public radio station, check out your library, and go online and see if you can download them for free. If you like recorded books, you might just find that you really enjoy old-time radio. There are a lot of different types of old-time radio shows, from funny to cheesy to heartwarming to scary as all hell. So I'm sure that you will find something that you will enjoy on this list. So here we go, my top 10. My number 10 slot goes to The Shadow. The Shadow was essentially Batman before Batman was Batman. He's this crime-solving guy who disguises himself as The Shadow, and he has this infamous line, "The Shadow knows." The Shadow is all up in all of the criminal's business. He's sneaking around. He knows way too much, more than he probably should know. But if you like to hear about crime being perpetrated and an awesome superhero-esque guy coming to the rescue, then definitely check out The Shadow. The Shadow is one of those shows that you can take a little bit less seriously. Some of the episodes are a little bit corny, okay, quite a few of them, but that's part of the charm. My number 9 spot goes to George Burns and Gracie Allen. Burns and Allen, their show is a comedy show. I don't know if you've ever heard of them. They were quite famous back in their time. It's basically a sitcom, an almost traditional sitcom. George and Gracie are a husband and wife duo who get up to all sorts of shenanigans. Gracie is a troublemaker and not necessarily the sharpest tool in the shed. And George Burns is a snarky, dry-witted foil to Gracie. And as a comedy show, it's one of my favorites, very amusing. There is a little bit of sexism going on. This is the time period after all. But it's easy to look past it and enjoy Burns and Allen. My number 8 spot goes to a very similar show, which I actually like just a little bit more than Burns and Allen, and that is Fibber McGee and Molly. Both of these shows are really similar in that they are sitcom-esque, with the couple getting up to shenanigans, and a very similar relationship with the couple. But with Fibber McGee and Molly, they're on a little bit more even footing. Not necessarily because they're both more intelligent, but because they are maybe a bit stupider. Both of them. They both get up to trouble because they make silly mistakes. There are a bunch of reoccurring characters that you will get to know and love, like the little girl character, and Mrs. Uppington, who's this super posh lady who doesn't know how the world works. And all of these characters are fun and interesting and weird, and that's why I love Fibber McGee and Molly. Next up is a bit of a tonal shift. My number 7 goes to The Twilight Zone. Yes, The Twilight Zone was actually on the radio before it was on TV. What? And let me tell you that I prefer my horror coming to me in radio play form than in any other form. The things that your mind can come up with are always going to be 10 times scarier than what they put on the screen, in my opinion. And if you want some real classics like The Talking Doll, The Last Night of the Jockey, all of those great classics that you maybe even saw on TV later but in their original radio play form, definitely check out The Twilight Zone. There's some really good stuff on there. My number 6 spot goes to a sci-fi show called X-1. Similarly to The Twilight Zone, X-1 is a different story each time, but they're sci-fi. I have found that the sci-fi of this time period is pretty corny, but if you're in the mood for some cheesy sci-fi and a little actiony sci-fi going on, definitely check out X-1. It's really fun and entertaining. My number 5 spot goes to another comedian, and this is a comedian that I grew up loving, and that is Jack Benny. The Jack Benny Show is one of the funniest things that I still have heard. And don't worry about the jokes going over your head because of the time period. Some of them may be a little hard to follow, but most of the jokes on all of these shows are pretty timeless. Jack Benny is one of the most skilled comedians that you will encounter, and I hope that his legacy continues to live on and that he will be remembered. Definitely check out his show. Jack Benny plays the character of Jack Benny, who is a rich man who has no idea how the world works, and he is so attached to his money, like ridiculously attached to his money. Jack Benny has this skill as a comedian to allow himself to be the butt of the jokes and to make everyone else seem like they're funnier than they are. Definitely go check him out if you'd like to find out some more about the comedy of the time. My number 4 spot goes to a cheesy-ass serial show that I really like. Serial show meaning there's an episode every week about like the same thing, and that is Sergeant Preston of the Yukon. This show is ham and cheese on a cheesy crusted bun, and I love it. Sergeant Preston is a Canadian mounted policeman who is working so far north that he has to use a sled dog team, which is pulled by his team of huskies and his heroic lead dog, King, who is way more intelligent than a dog has any right being, and really loud. He barks a lot. King is essentially Lassie on steroids. Anyway, the heroic Sergeant Preston and his dog King are dealing with the Gold Rush Society up there in the north and all of the criminals that come along with it. It's cheesy, it's corny, it's delightful. If you're in the mood for some old-fashioned adventure fun, definitely check out Sergeant Preston of the Yukon. My number 3 spot goes to my favorite horror type of show, which is similar to The Twilight Zone, but that is Lights Out. I love Lights Out. Again, it has all of these different horror stories. Unlike Twilight Zone, though, it mostly focuses on horror and trying to scare you. Now, of course, there are quite a few stinkers in there, but when Lights Out gets it right, it gets it right. And the intro to Lights Out, just gets you in the mood to be afraid. Just the intro sequence. So if you are in the mood to be scared, definitely check out Lights Out. My number 2 spot goes to a detective story, and that is Nero Wolfe. I love a lot of detective stories out there, but my favorite by far is Nero Wolfe. Nero Wolfe is an extremely overweight detective who hates to leave his office, and his sidekick is the incredibly handsome Archie Goodwin, who makes all the ladies swoon. Archie is kind of delightful to me, even though he's completely a sexist, of course, time period, and he's like this huge Casanova. But I love that he is also really kind of sassy and opinionated and snarky, that even though he works for Nero Wolfe, he will talk back to him and sass back pretty much anyone. Archie is your stereotypical handsome hero boy, while Nero Wolfe is the brains of the outfit. Interestingly enough, I have heard many people say that Nero Wolfe, the radio program, does not do justice to the books that it was based on. I, having been introduced first to Nero Wolfe, the radio program, attempted to check out one of the books, and I was bored. I think I really do kind of need the over-the-top quality that the radio program gives it for me to enjoy it. But if you like a detective story that can sometimes be cheesy but has really interesting characters and a dynamic that's very engaging, Nero Wolfe might be for you. And my number 1 slot goes to a particular episode of Mercury Theater of the Air. Mercury Theater of the Air is kind of what it sounds like. They put on radio plays. But a certain radio play captured my attention when I was younger and is still one of my favorites of all time, and I really recommend that if you have any interest at all, you go check it out. And that is the infamous War of the Worlds radio play. You've probably heard about it, and some of you even may have read the War of the Worlds, but the radio play goes above and beyond, and I love it so much. When I was a kid, I used to sit and imagine that it was like happening in my world, and I would allow myself to get really into it, and I would be checking out the window for fucking aliens coming across the field. That's how into it I let myself get. Now, of course, some of you have probably heard about the great scare that happened when this radio play was first aired, and it is highly exaggerated. People didn't commit suicide all over the place, and no one was all that terrified. Remember, they were used to radio plays at this time, and they knew that Mercury Theater of the Air was coming on in that time slot. So the way that it was produced like a news report didn't actually scare that many people. But the day after, or whatever after, there were several complaints from people who had at first, when they first tuned in, been alarmed until they obviously realized that it was a radio play because aliens were not really attacking them. So, overblown story, but still a fun story to have with it. Some people were still concerned about it, but the format and the way it's done, it makes it an amazing radio play that I really feel like if you have any interest at all, you need to listen to War of the Worlds. The other thing that you may notice if you decide to check out old time radio is that they often include the commercials of the time, because the commercials were sometimes extremely clumsily woven into the narrative of the story. Sometimes there are traditional commercial breaks at the beginning, middle, and end of the story, but any way you slice it, the commercials are really interesting and fascinating to listen to as well, especially since many of the products that are being advertised are still sold today. So there you go, one of my secret hidden passions, old-time radio. Definitely go and give some of my suggestions a listen if it interests you at all, and then report back here as to your findings. Is it something that you feel like still has value and we should introduce to our children like I was introduced to it at a young age? There are a ton more series that I love. I had to take it down to 10, so if you have any interest and you want more suggestions from me, again, post a comment below and I'll let you know. And remember, if you like what you see here on my channel, like, subscribe, yada yada, but what would really help me out is if you genuinely enjoy what you see here, you share it with your friends. You know, I just realized that no cats invaded my recording in this episode, and I'm a little worried about where they are. I think they're in the living room, watching TV. My cats are weird. I'll see you guys next time.